Most people spend their youth saving too little and their old age saving too much. It's one of the great comedies of modern life. You finally reach the age when you should be using money to buy time, comfort, and dignity. And instead, you keep behaving like you're still 25 and one missed paycheck away from disaster. Let me be blunt. If you're over 60 and still obsessing over saving every penny, you've already misunderstood the whole point of wealth. Money is a tool, not a trophy. And a tool that never gets used is just dead weight. People think getting old automatically makes them wise. It doesn't. It just makes their habits hard to break. If you spent 40 years clutching every dollar, you won't magically wake up at 60 with a brilliant philosophy about spending. You'll keep clutching. You'll keep shrinking your life. And you'll tell yourself it's discipline when it's really just fear of wearing a respectable suit. I've met plenty of people who saved themselves into misery. They weren't poor. They just behaved like poverty was waiting behind every door. And when you live like that long enough, you become a prisoner of your own caution. I grew up in the Great Depression. I know what real scarcity looks like. I know what it means to watch adults break down because there's no work to be found. Fear of running out is baked into the bones of people from my generation. But here's the difference. Fear is useful when you're 20 and broke. It's poison when you're 60 and financially secure. At 60, your job isn't to hoard. Your job is to allocate your remaining life sensibly. And life, unfortunately, is not a long-term asset. It's a rapidly depreciating one. By 60, most people don't have an earning problem. They have a spending problem, but not in the way you think. They don't overspend, they underspend. They treat every expense like a personal failure. They'd rather leave a perfectly good resource unused than risk a little discomfort. This is stupidity disguised as prudence. And stupidity is always expensive, especially the self-righteous kind. People love to talk about leaving a legacy, but the world doesn't need more martyrs who die with full bank accounts and empty experiences. If you want to give money to your kids, do it while you're alive, and they can still use it sensibly. Most inheritances arrive too late, like a fire extinguisher delivered after the house is burned down. And if you're planning to leave it all to charity, wonderful. But don't confuse generosity with self-neglect. There's no virtue in living your final 20 years like a monk while a pile of money gathers dust. Let me tell you something simple. After 60, the highest return on investment isn't in stocks or bonds or real estate. It's in quality of life. Better health, less stress, more time with people who matter, experiences that remind you you're still alive. Money can buy these things, not perfectly, but reliably enough. And if you refuse to spend on them, you're making the worst investment mistake of all. You're letting fear outperform your intelligence. I've said for decades that the first $100,000 is the hardest. After you've crossed that line, money starts to behave. It compounds. It serves you. But past 60, the equation flips again. Now you serve money unless you consciously decide not to. If you're still pinching pennies at an age when you should be pinching moments, you've got your priorities backward. A frugal young person is admirable. A frugal old person is often just confused about the true purpose of wealth. Most people are so terrified of running out that they never consider a more realistic problem, running out of life first. You don't need to become reckless. You don't need to burn through your savings like a drunken sailor. You need a rational plan, not a fear-driven one. But the plan should reflect reality. You won't be here forever, and the years you have left aren't interchangeable. Your 70s are not your 90s. Your 60s are not some bonus decade where you wait for permission to enjoy yourself. If you've won the game, meaning you have enough, stop acting like you're still trying to qualify for the first round. You don't get extra points for dying with the smallest electric bill or the most untouched retirement fund. People forget this simple truth. Money is meant to be used wisely, not worshipped endlessly. By 60, the greatest danger isn't overspending. It's letting the fear of overspending ruin the last good chapters of your life. You spent decades working, sacrificing, saving, and planning. Don't let old habits consume the reward. At some point, and that point is around 60, continuing to save aggressively stops being prudent and starts being irrational. Because past 60, money is no longer compounding. Life doesn't compound in a bank account. It compounds in action, relationships, and experiences that actually matter. If that idea bothers you, it's probably because you've confused saving with security. Real security comes from judgment, not from a bigger number on a statement. And judgment says this: you can't take it with you, but you can certainly leave too much of it unused. People think poverty in old age comes from not saving enough. In many cases, it comes from saving too much for too long and refusing to adapt when life changes. It's astonishing how many people hit 60, 70, even 75 and still behave like they're one bad paycheck away from sleeping under a bridge. You'd think after working for 40 or 50 years they'd learn something about the world. But fear has a way of freezing people in the mindset of their younger, poorer selves. It's emotional inertia. And emotional inertia is one of the costliest forces in personal finance. I've known people who were financially secure by any reasonable definition, paid off homes, reliable pension, steady dividends from conservative holdings, more cash than they could possibly spend. Yet they lived like church mice, counting eggs, reusing tea bags, driving cars that should have been donated to science. They weren't thrifty. They were scared. And fear makes even intelligent people act stupidly. The irony is that fear doesn't protect you. It just stops you from using the resources you spent a lifetime accumulating. You end up poorer, not because you lack money, but because you refuse to access it. I once watched a man in his early 70s refuse to turn on his air conditioner during a scorching California summer because he didn't want the electric bill creeping up. This same man had 7 figures quietly lounging around in index funds. He wouldn't use money to buy comfort. He preferred sweat. That's not discipline, that's maladaptive behavior. In economics, we talk a lot about rational agents, but real humans are rarely rational, and nothing exposes irrationality like aging. When you're young, fear can motivate useful behavior. It gets you to save. It keeps you out of debt. It pushes you to be responsible. But at 60, fear becomes a parasite. It feeds on your judgment, not your laziness. People obsessed with saving at 60 are solving a problem they no longer have. It's like continuing to buy baby formula when your kid is in college. It made sense once, but life has moved on and you haven't. One of the advantages of living through the Great Depression was that I learned the difference between real threat and phantom threat. Real threats are obvious. You can see them, feel them, smell them. Phantom threats live in your head and show up in dumb financial behavior, like hoarding cash you'll never use or refusing to repair a roof because the contractor feels too expensive. Most people die with far more money than they expected. That's another great comedy of the human condition. They worry all their lives about running out and then exit the stage with pockets full. The final punchline is that someone else's kids, grandkids, or the IRS gets to enjoy what they were too scared to touch. Fear robs you twice. It takes your joy while you're alive, and it takes your judgment about what life requires in each chapter. If you're 60 and you still act like money spent is a moral failure, let me tell you something uncomfortable. You didn't win the game. The game won you. You followed rules that made sense when you were 25, but you forgot to update them when you became 65. I've always said the ability to change your mind is a superpower. Most people don't have it. They cling to old habits like a life raft, even when the shore is right in front of them. The lesson is simple. The financial threat at 60 isn't overspending. It's underspending, driven by fear, that no longer reflects reality. Your goal in old age is not accumulation. It's maintenance of health, comfort, relationships, and dignity. These things cost money, sometimes more money than you're comfortable spending. But refusing to spend doesn't protect you. It just lowers the quality of the only life you have left. You don't need to be reckless, but you do need to be rational. A rational 60-year-old uses money to solve 60-year-old problems like health, mobility, and time, not 20-year-old problems like rent or student loans. Fear won't tell you that. Fear will tell you to hoard, to shrink, to retreat. Fear wants you to think the world hasn't changed since 1932. But you're not living in 1932 anymore. Neither am I. And the costs of letting fear dictate your behavior are far greater than the costs of living a slightly fuller life, especially when you can afford it. One of the great tragedies of modern retirement is how many people leave this world with more money than they ever dared to use. And believe me, it's not a sign of brilliance. It's a sign of miscalculation, a life lived with the wrong scoreboard. People think dying with a big pile of cash means they were responsible. Often it means they were scared, unimaginative, or simply too stubborn to adjust their financial behavior as they aged. You don't get a medal for exiting life with unspent resources. There's no tombstone that says, "Here lies a man who kept his heating bill impressively low." I've said many times, the easiest way to live a miserable old age is to keep behaving like you're still preparing for it. And that's what most people do. They treat money like some sacred relic that must be preserved for future generations. Meanwhile, they slowly suffocate their own final decades, convinced that self-denial is a form of wisdom. It isn't. It's just inertia wearing a halo. I've known people who lived 80, 90, even 100 with portfolios that grew untouched because they were too frightened to enjoy any of it. They died with millions and lived like paupers. Their biggest expense was probably their funeral, which is the most ridiculous ROI you can imagine. Let me tell you something unpleasant. If you die with too much money, you misallocated your resources. You failed to convert capital into a better life. You hoarded something meant to be used. People like to brag that their investments kept compounding long into retirement. What they don't mention is that their life didn't. That's the real loss. You see this especially with people who came out of hardship, survivors of war, recession, bankruptcy, financial humiliation. They never lose the fear. Even when they win, they act like losers waiting to be exposed. They forget that life has seasons. Saving is for some seasons, spending is for others. A rational person shifts gears. An emotional person keeps driving in first gear until the engine blows. And let's not pretend this problem is noble. It's not generosity. It's not discipline. It's not strategic sacrifice. It's fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of letting go, fear of wanting something you think you don't deserve. There are people who sit alone in dim houses while their brokerage accounts swell. They skip vacations, ignore hobbies, reject small pleasures, and spend their final years staring at the same four walls. Then they die, and suddenly their children discover that mom or dad had enough money to buy 3 houses and a yacht. That's not a legacy. That's a mystery novel with a very sad ending. And don't get me wrong, I'm not telling you to burn through your cash like a lunatic. Being reckless is just another form of stupidity. But there's a big difference between prudence and paralysis. A lot of older people stay frugal because they're terrified of becoming a burden. It's a legitimate concern, but overcorrecting doesn't solve the problem. Dying with a fortune doesn't prove you were responsible. It proves your fear management strategy was off by a wide margin. You don't need to spend blindly, but you do need to spend intentionally, especially on the things that matter when you're running out of time. And let's talk about kids for a moment. Some parents act like the best gift they can give their children is a massive inheritance. It's not. The best gift is having lived a life that teaches them something about judgment, resilience, and wise allocation of resources. Leaving them a fortune while you live like a hermit only teaches them that fear is hereditary. And here's a dirty little secret. Most kids would rather see their parents enjoy the last 20 years of their lives than inherit a slightly larger pile of money. Money is a tool. Tools are supposed to be used. Nobody admires a carpenter who dies with all his tools shiny and untouched. You spent decades making sacrifices. You worked when you were tired. You saved when it was difficult. You avoided stupidity and built a cushion to protect yourself. If you refuse to use that cushion in the final chapters of your life, what exactly was the point? No investment yields higher returns in old age than comfort, health, peace of mind, and experiences worth remembering. The market can give you money, but it cannot give you time. And when the clock is winding down, refusing to use what you have is the biggest mispricing error of all. Dying with too much money isn't a financial achievement. It's a misjudgment of life's diminishing opportunities. Use what you earned. Spend what you saved. Live the last years with the same intelligence you used to build your wealth, not with the same fears that shaped your youth. Most people create retirement plans based on a fantasy version of their older selves. In these fantasies, they're healthy, energetic, mobile, sharp, and eager to enjoy life. But reality is far less flattering. Your body starts sending unpleasant reminders. Your mind slows down. Your energy drops. Your tolerance for discomfort shrinks to almost nothing. And yet people keep saving money as if they'll be climbing mountains at 85. Let me be very clear. Old age comes with a steady decline in optionality. The things you can do at 65 may be impossible at 75 and irrelevant at 85. If you don't spend money while you still have options, you'll eventually lose the ability to spend it meaningfully at all. There's a silent tragedy that plays out in almost every household with aging parents or grandparents. They reach the age where money could genuinely improve their day-to-day life. Better meals, safer transportation, comfortable living arrangements, medical support, companionship, and instead they tighten their budget. It's the wrong instinct at the wrong time. You'd be amazed at how many 80-year-olds refuse help not because they don't need it, but because they don't want to spend the money. Meanwhile, that same money sits idle in accounts they'll never empty. And their final years become harder than they need to be. They aren't being strong. They're being stubborn. Strength is knowing when to adapt. Stubbornness is refusing to adapt because fear feels familiar. The decline comes for everyone, even the people who feel young at heart. Your body doesn't care about your optimism. Your joints won't negotiate with your pride. Your eyesight won't improve because you're trying to be frugal. That's why saving aggressively after 60 is such a misguided strategy. You're saving for a chapter of life that will have fewer and fewer windows for enjoyment. You're saving for years when your primary expenses aren't experiences, they're healthcare, support, and convenience. You shouldn't be saving harder. You should be saving smarter. At 60, 70, 80, the question isn't, how do I make this money last forever? It's, how do I convert this money into a life that doesn't become unnecessarily difficult? People underestimate the rate at which decline accelerates. When you're 40, the changes are subtle. When you're 60, they speed up. When you're 70 or 80, they come at you like a freight train. A rational person adjusts. Most people don't. I've watched people who insisted on cleaning their own gutters at 75 because they didn't want to waste money on help. They saved $70. They paid for it with a broken hip. It's the most ridiculous trade I've ever seen. And it's not rare. I've met 80-year-olds with enough money to hire a full-time caretaker, but they refuse because the monthly cost seems high. Meanwhile, their quality of life is shrinking by the week. They're not protecting their money. They're sacrificing their dignity to protect a number. This is the strange logic of old age. People are terrified of wasting money, but not terrified enough of wasting their remaining years. Let me tell you something harsh but necessary. The real waste is time you can't get back, not money you can't take with you. If you've already won the game, stop playing like you're one mistake from losing it. Spending money on help, comfort, health, and convenience when you're older is not indulgence. It's good strategy. It's the intelligent way to stretch the usefulness of your remaining years. Think about it. What good is an impressive net worth at 90 if you can't travel, can't socialize, can't pursue hobbies, can't go anywhere without assistance, and are too frail to enjoy even simple pleasures? The common fantasy is that one day you'll enjoy the fruits of your labor. But once you're past 60, one day has to be now, not some imaginary future where you'll magically be healthier and more energetic. The decline is certain. What's uncertain is whether you'll use your resources to soften that decline or let fear accelerate it. Here's a simple exercise I've told people. Imagine a chart with two curves. One shows your physical ability declining. The other shows your accumulated savings increasing. At some point they cross. After that point, every extra dollar you save becomes less useful because your ability to enjoy what that dollar can buy drops faster than your balance grows. Most people keep saving long after the useful window is closed. They end up with money they can't use, in a body that can't benefit from it, in a life that's growing smaller every year. That's not frugality. That's poor asset allocation. No rational investor would hold an asset long after the window of opportunity to use it has passed. But people do exactly that with their savings. Stop imagining old age as a second youth. Stop imagining you'll enjoy it later. Later gets narrow. Later get kieti. Later gets harder. Use your money when it can still buy mobility, health, comfort, and choices. Because the day will come when money can only buy medical bills and regrets. If you want to understand why people save obsessively after 60, you don't need a finance textbook. You need a psychology textbook, preferably a thick one, because the behavior has nothing to do with spreadsheets and everything to do with fear, habit, and a complete misunderstanding of risk. The phrase that ruins more late life happiness than anything else is simple, just in case. Older people cling to it like a security blanket. They refuse to spend on comfort, upgrades, experiences, or help because they're always preparing for some vague, catastrophic scenario that exists mostly in their imagination. And here's the irony. The disasters they fear rarely happen. The hardships they create by underspending happen every day. Just in case thinking is a psychological trap disguised as prudence. It sounds responsible. It feels cautious, but it leads to the exact opposite of intelligent living. Let me give you an example. I once knew a couple in their 70s who refused to replace their old miserable mattress. They didn't want to waste money. They slept poorly for years. Their backs hurt. Their mood was rotten. And the first time they finally agreed to buy a new mattress, their children had to drag them into the store. What changed their mind? Not wisdom. Pain. The kind of pain that could have been avoided with a simple purchase a decade earlier. This is what fear-driven frugality looks like. Small comforts get ignored. Small improvements get postponed. Small expenses get demonized. And life becomes unnecessarily punishing. There's nothing noble about self-imposed discomfort, but fear convinces people that suffering now will protect them later. That's not rationality, that's superstition. People over 60 often tell themselves stories about future crises. What if the economy collapses? What if I get sick? What if I live to 100 and run out of money? What if my children need help? What if inflation explodes? What if I need long-term care someday? These fears feel huge, but they're vague. And vague fears are the most expensive kind because people over-prepare for them without any sense of proportion. Yes, medical bills happen. Yes, unexpected expenses happen. Yes, you should have reserves. But the human mind is terrible at estimating risk late in life. It multiplies every danger by 10. It imagines the worst possible version of every scenario, and it convinces you that enjoying your remaining years is somehow irresponsible. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most just-in-case hoards end up becoming never used at all. Now, people save for emergencies that never come and then face the much more predictable emergency they never prepared for. The emergency of being too old to enjoy life. You want to see irrational fear in action? Watch someone in their 70s refuse to take a taxi because it's too expensive, then walk on an icy sidewalk and break a wrist. They saved $15. Their medical bill was $15,000, and their suffering was priceless. This is not prudence. This is terrible risk management. A rational 60-year-old should aim to prevent the most predictable dangers of old age: falls, loneliness, chronic pain, isolation, cognitive decline, and loss of independence. All of these can be mitigated with money: a safer home, reliable transportation, better food, cleaner living conditions, social activities, medical monitoring, physical therapy. But instead, many older people hoard their money for random hypothetical catastrophes, things with low probability and high imagination value. They're guarding against asteroids and ignoring potholes. Just in case becomes a mental prison. You start believing that spending money is the danger, instead of recognizing that not spending it is the real threat to your well-being. Ask anyone who has cared for aging parents. They'll tell you the same story. Mom or dad could have had an easier life. More comfort, more support, more dignity. But they refused to spend. They weren't being wise. They were being afraid. And fear convinced them that deprivation was safe. Let me offer you a simple rule that would have saved a lot of older people a lot of misery. If spending money removes a daily annoyance, prevents a likely danger, or buys back meaningful comfort, spend it immediately, not after 20 committee meetings with your conscience. You spent decades building a financial cushion. At some point, you're supposed to sit on it, not balance on the edge while staring at it suspiciously. The tragedy is that the just-in-case mindset grows strongest in the exact years when life becomes most fragile. Instead of securing comfort, people secure anxiety. Instead of investing in their own aging bodies, they invest in imaginary disasters. It's the wrong strategy for the wrong stage of life. You don't need to burn through your savings, but you do need to stop letting fear negotiate every decision, because fear has only one answer. No. No vacations. No upgrades. No changes. No help. No enjoyment. No relief. No spending. You can't build a satisfying old age with a tool that only knows how to say no. The intelligent approach isn't reckless spending. It's recognizing that money is meant to serve the phase of life you're actually in, not the one you're afraid might come. You're not 20 anymore. You're not preparing to raise children. You're not scraping together down payments. You're not climbing a career ladder. You're not trying to prove anything. You're 60 plus. The just-in-case years are behind you. The use what you've earned years are here. And if you don't learn that distinction, you'll die with too much money and too little life. There's a point in life when saving is rational, admirable, and necessary. And there's another point, usually after 60, when saving quietly mutates into something far less flattering. Hoarding. People don't like that word. It sounds ugly. It sounds compulsive. It sounds like a problem other people have. But look closely at how many retirees behave. They're not making strategic financial decisions. They're clutching money the way a frightened child clutches a blanket, because letting go feels dangerous, even when holding on hurts them. Saving is a plan. Hoarding is a reflex. A rational saver knows what the money is for. A hoarder only knows that the money must not be touched. I've met plenty of older people who keep saving out of pure momentum. They're like runners who crossed the finish line decades ago but are still sprinting because they can't stand the idea of stopping. Stopping would mean reassessing their life. Stopping would mean admitting they've entered a new chapter. Stopping would mean confronting time, something money can't protect you from. Hoarding gives them the illusion of control, but it doesn't fix anything. It just ensures they never enjoy what they've spent a lifetime acquiring. Let me tell you who hoards money late in life. People who don't trust their own judgment. People who think caution is the same as intelligence. People who are terrified of unexpected change. People who confuse self-denial with moral virtue. People who think using money is somehow sinful or irresponsible. None of these beliefs help you live well. All of them help you shrink your life. I once knew a woman in her 80s who refused to buy a new pair of glasses. Her prescription had changed. Her eyesight was blurry. She tripped over things. She got headaches, but she insisted the old glasses were fine because new ones are too expensive. She wasn't poor. She wasn't struggling. She simply couldn't shake the mentality that spending money was morally suspect. Her children eventually bought the glasses for her. And the moment she put them on, she said one sentence that perfectly illustrates the stupidity of hoarding. "Oh, I didn't know things still looked this clear." This is what hoarding steals from you: clarity, comfort, ease, and the simple pleasures of being alive. The tragedy is that older people don't notice the cost because the decline happens gradually. They normalize discomfort. They normalize inconvenience. They normalize a life that gets smaller every year, and they call it being careful. But there's nothing careful about letting fear shrink your world. Consider this. If your net worth keeps increasing after 60 and your quality of life keeps decreasing, you're doing something wrong. It means you're allocating resources backward, growing the pile that matters least while starving the part of life that matters most. No competent investor would deliberately reinvest in the least productive asset while starving the high return one. But people do it all the time with their money in their life. Hoarding is also contagious. It spreads into other areas: relationships, decisions, opportunities. People become hoarders of time, saying no to invitations, no to experiences, no to anything unfamiliar. They hoard their energy. They hoard their curiosity, and eventually they hoard their own potential. By trying to preserve everything, they end up preserving nothing. The problem is that hoarding masquerades as discipline. It looks clean. It looks responsible. It looks moral, but it's really fear in a suit and tie. Discipline says, use money wisely. Hoarding says, never use it at all. Here's a little rule of thumb. Only an old man will tell you, if you have more than enough and still can't bring yourself to spend on things that genuinely improve your life, you don't have a financial problem. You have a psychological one. And psychological problems don't get better with more saving. They get worse. You don't fix fear by feeding it. You don't fix insecurity by reinforcing it. And you certainly don't fix aging by pretending you can outsave it. Money saved in your 20s buys opportunity. Money saved in your 60s should buy ease. Money saved in your 70s should buy support. Money saved in your 80s should buy relief. Money saved in your 90s should buy peace. But money hoarded at any age buys nothing. It just sits there like an unplayed instrument, waiting for someone braver than you to use it. And here's the funny part. The people who inherit it, your kids, your grandkids, charities, the government will spend it without hesitation. They won't feel an ounce of the fear that froze you. They won't agonize over replacing a mattress or upgrading a pair of glasses. They'll spend freely because it's not their prison. It's their windfall. Your fear becomes their surplus. Your anxiety becomes their convenience. Your sacrifices become their shopping decisions. And if that doesn't make you rethink hoarding, nothing will. You didn't spend your whole life earning money just to let fear manage it in the final act. Money is meant to be circulated, converted, deployed, not embalmed. Hoarding is a bad investment. A shrinking life is the worst return you can possibly get. Most people never stop to ask the simplest question, What is money actually for once you're past 60? They assume the answer is the same as it was at 30 or 40. Stay frugal, keep saving, avoid risk, accumulate more just in case. That's the thinking that ruins the final third of life. Because after 60, money stops being a tool for accumulation and becomes a tool for preservation. Not of wealth, but of quality of life. If you don't understand that shift, you'll waste decades treating old age like a continuation of middle age, and you'll save yourself right into unnecessary hardship. Let me put it plainly. Money after 60 should buy time, comfort, protection, and dignity. Not trophy, not bragging rights, not an impressive net worth that strangers will never see. Time is the rarest currency. Comfort becomes the highest yield investment. And dignity, well, that's the one thing most people don't realize they'll need until it's too late. Money can buy all three, but only if you use it. You'd be amazed at how many older people refuse to spend money on things that clearly improve their life. They tell themselves, I don't need it. Of course they do. They just don't want to admit that life has changed. A man at 30 doesn't need help carrying groceries. A man at 75 often does. But instead of hiring help, many older people force themselves through needless struggle because they're terrified of appearing weak or wasteful. Let me tell you something only the elderly understand. There's nothing noble about unnecessary suffering. You don't earn extra points for refusing comfort. All you earn is pain. The real purpose of money in old age is to solve the problems younger people can solve with strength. A 20-year-old lifts the heavy box. A 60-year-old hires someone to lift the box. And an 80-year-old should have done that 10 years earlier. That's not laziness. That's intelligent adaptation. But adaptation requires ego control, something most people never master. Many older people cling to the illusion that they're still self-sufficient. They refuse help. They minimize their needs. They downplay their struggles. Meanwhile, their quality of life drops by the month. And for what? To save a few $100s? To pretend they're still who they were 20 years ago? To impress whom? No one is watching. No one cares. Your pride hurts you more than any expense ever will. Money after 60 should also buy you freedom from chores that chip away at your health and time. Cooking when you're exhausted. Driving when your reflexes are slower. Cleaning when your balance is unsteady. Handling paperwork that stresses you out. Shoveling snow when your back is fragile. Climbing ladders. Carrying loads. Fixing appliances. These things don't prove independence. They prove stubbornness. A rational 60-year-old outsources anything that has a non-zero chance of sending them to the hospital. People underestimate how fragile the body becomes with age. One fall can erase 10 years of careful financial planning. One accident can wipe out the comfort you spent a lifetime building. Money is the buffer. Money is the substitute for youth. Money is the thing you use when your body refuses to cooperate. If you don't use it, you're denying yourself the one advantage age has left. And here's another purpose of money after 60 that most people ignore: buying back your time. Older people act like they have infinite hours to waste. They don't. If anything, every hour is more precious than it has ever been. So why are you still waiting in long lines, hunting for tiny discounts, doing tasks that drain you, or forcing yourself to endure inconveniences that money could solve in an instant? You're not saving money. You're wasting life. Pay for convenience. Pay for speed. Pay for comfort. Pay for ease. You've paid for everyone else your whole life. Bosses, companies, governments, children. Maybe it's time to pay for yourself. And let's talk about dignity. Most people underestimate how quickly they can lose it in old age. Losing mobility, losing independence, losing confidence, these things happen quietly and then all at once. Money won't heal every decline, but it can soften the landing. It can give you control over your living environment. It can buy professional help. instead of relying on exhausted relatives. It can give you privacy, safety, autonomy, choice. Without money, aging humiliates you. With money, aging becomes manageable. That's not greed. That's preparation. So what's the real purpose of money after 60? It's simple: to make the years you have left easier than the years you endured, to convert decades of discipline into meaningful comfort, to protect your remaining energy, your shrinking strength, and your dignity, to let you enjoy the last chapters instead of merely surviving them. But all of that requires one thing many older people refuse to do: spend intelligently, deliberately, unapologetically. Because the harsh truth is this: if you don't use your money to improve your life after 60, you've misunderstood the entire point of having it. You earned it. You saved it. You protected it. Now let it do its job. By the time you reach 60, life stops grading you on how much you've accumulated. It starts grading you on how intelligently you use what you have left: your time, your energy, your relationships, and yes, your money. Most people fail that exam, not because they're reckless, but because they're trapped in an outdated script. They keep acting like the goal is to avoid running out of money. But past 60, the real danger is running out of life first. You spent decades following rules that made sense when you were young. Save aggressively, work hard, delay gratification, plan for the future. Those rules were correct for that chapter. But every chapter ends. And the tragedy is that almost no one updates their behavior to match reality. People don't age financially. They only age physically. So their body steps into a new stage of life, while their mind stubbornly stays in the old one. You see this everywhere. A 70-year-old clipping coupons with a 7-figure portfolio. An 80-year-old refusing help because it costs too much. A 65-year-old saying maybe later to travel. They're already too tired to take. People who built a lifetime of security and then refused to use a single ounce of it when it mattered most. If there's one message I want hammered into your head, it's this: money is not the point. Life is. You don't get extra points for exiting the world with the largest balance sheet. You don't get a discount on death for living cheaply. You don't get rewarded for hoarding comfort you could have used. There's a reason I've spent decades warning people about envy, debt, and stupidity. They ruin your financial life. But fear ruins your final years. Fear convinces you that spending is dangerous. Fear convinces you that comfort is indulgence. Fear convinces you that using your savings is somehow irresponsible. Fear convinces you that the worst-case scenario is always around the corner. Well, let me give you the honest version. The worst-case scenario is reaching the end of your life with regrets you could have prevented and money you never used. Spend on health while it still improves your days. Spend on comfort while it still removes real pain. Spend on experiences while you can still remember them. Spend on support before you fall and break something you can't replace. Spend on ease instead of struggle. Spend on dignity instead of pride. You're not burning money. You're preventing suffering. I've outlived most people I grew up with. I've buried friends, partners, colleagues, competitors. I can tell you with complete certainty, not one of them ever said, "I wish I had saved more at 80." But many of them said, "I waited too long to enjoy what I had." Time has a funny way of making all financial debates irrelevant. No matter what number you achieve, time will win. All you get to decide is whether you use your resources wisely before that happens. So here's the final accounting. If you've already won the game, stop playing like you're still qualifying for it. Stop acting like the goal is to exit with the biggest pile. Stop pretending the fear that served you at 30 still serves you at 70. You don't need permission to use your money. You need perspective. Spend rationally. Spend intentionally. Spend while it actually improves your life. Spend because you earned the right to. Spend because the future you've been saving for is no longer someday. It's now. And If you still need a final line to push you over the edge, here it is. If your money outlives you by too much, you misplayed the game. Make sure your life gets its fair share before the clock runs out.